Jordan Belfort is an American entrepreneur, author, former stockbroker, and financial criminal known for his stock market manipulation schemes where he and his entourage made millions. But he is perhaps best known for the time he spent partying and doing drugs in a life of decadence so over the top, it has been the subject of 2 best-selling memoirs and a movie, The Wolf of Wall Street, starring Leonardo DiCaprio as Jordan Belfort. Described as entertaining as Pulp Fiction, but as real as a federal indictment. The question is, how did this guy crash multiple luxury automobiles, a helicopter, and a 167-foot yacht and walk away from it unscathed? Well, you're about to find out. I'm Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you are watching Lawyer Up. In today's episode, we're going to be examining the life of Jordan Belfort. We're going to talk about his childhood, his early life, and of course, all of those wild and crazy antics that accompanied his time with the stock market firm of Stratton Oakmont. We're going to talk about his wives, his children, his legal troubles, his time in prison, and of course, where he is today, because it ain't prison. If you enjoy the episode, hit that like button for me. If you got something to say, put it in the comment sections below. And if you haven't subscribed, what are you waiting for? Smash that subscribe button right now. Jordan Ross Belfort was born in 1962 in New York. He was raised by Jewish parents, Max and Leah, who were both accountants. Belfort's entrepreneurial side blossomed early as he and a childhood buddy made $20,000 one summer. Not with a lemonade stand, but close, by selling Italian ice out of a styrofoam cooler to people at the local beach. Belfort went on to graduate high school and college from American University with a degree in biology. Then it was on to the University of Maryland School of Dentistry, where he lasted 1 day. He left after the dean of the school said, "If you're here simply to make money, you're in the wrong place." And Belfort decided that he was. From there, Belfort would marry his high school sweetheart, Denise Lombardo, in 1985 and become a door-to-door meat and seafood salesman on Long Island. And while the business was an initial success, employing several workers, ultimately, it faltered and he was forced to file bankruptcy at the age of 25. Ready for a fresh start, a family friend helped him get a job as a stockbroker trainee at L.F. Rothschild in 1987. And that's where he met the drug, sex, and adrenaline-fueled stockbroker named Mark Hanna. Infatuated by his wild lifestyle, Jordan quickly embraced the drug-fueled stockbroker culture and adopted his boss's mantra that a broker's only goal is to make money for himself. And things were going along swimmingly until October 19th, 1987, Black Monday, the largest one-day stock market drop in history, after which time Belfort was laid off as the firm experienced financial difficulties related to the downturn. Wanting to stay in the business, Belfort searched for work until he landed upon a firm selling penny stocks to a clientele much lower on the financial food chain. While the stock values were much smaller, the commission percentage he was earning was much higher. And he quickly learned that puffing up or just outright lying about a stock's potential upside would make the sale of at least some amount of penny stock very, very easy. So Jordan, being the charismatic and natural-born leader that he was, quickly rose to the top of the company and made a small fortune. But he was still giving a portion of his earnings to the owner. And wanting to be the owner, wanting to be that guy, Jordan and a neighbor in his apartment building, Danny Porish, branched out and started their own brokerage firm, Stratton Oakmont, in 1989. Those two recruited several of their friends who they trained in the art of the hard sell. Jordan even wrote scripts for brokers to read to aid in those stock sales. The firm primarily pushed penny stocks, but ultimately would peddle any stock they could build a fake story of future success around. Stratton Oakmont primarily used pump and dump tactics, where they would buy up a bunch of penny stock. And I mean a bunch, buying it at the lowest possible price. And that act would increase the stock in its value. Then they would call their clientele, singing the stock's praises, providing bolstered, if not downright false information about the company. The clients would then buy up a bunch more of that stock, further inflating its value, thus completing the pump. Next, Stratton would sell all of their stock at this inflated value. That's the dump, which caused the stock price to crash back to its original penny value, leaving the remaining shareholders with a worthless stock and lost money. And here's a concrete example to illustrate exactly how this could make someone wicked rich. So let's say that Stratton buys 1 million shares at a penny a share. That action causes the value to go up, let's say to $1. Then they peddle it to their clients, bolstering the stock with false information. Their clients are buying it at that $1 a share value. This second round of action causes the stock's value to go up even more, let's say to $2 a share. That would complete the pump. Then Stratton would sell or dump all of their shares. And remember, in buying in at a penny a share and then selling at $2 a share, that's a 20,000% increase on your money. In hard numbers, you just turned $10,000 into $2 million. So Stratton bought low and sold high. Their investors who relied upon Stratton advice bought high at that, say, $1 a share, and then were left holding a worthless stock because of Stratton's actions. It's unethical, which is why it's illegal, and Stratton did this numerous times with numerous companies. And they did it boiler room style. Now, a boiler room is a slang phrase that in business refers to an outbound call center that uses high pressure or otherwise questionable sales tactics. Most boiler rooms are characterized by poor working conditions, not Stratton Oakmont. During his years at Stratton, Belfort threw lavish parties, providing sex, drugs, and rock and roll for his employees. And he built basically a cult following where employees were encouraged to use drugs during the workday to keep the energy up. And he rewarded them with hookers and drugs and, of course, money. And Belfort, well, he was partying right along with them. And his drugs of choice were cocaine and quaaludes. He and several top executives would develop quite a drug habit. By the end, Belfort would say that his daily intake involved over 20 different illegal and/or prescription drugs at the same time. His specific quote was that he took enough drugs on a daily basis to sedate the country of Guatemala. And after an expose of their boiler room antics in a national magazine, Belfort thought that he might be ruined. Instead, hundreds of young stockbrokers flocked to his company. As Jordan Belfort became more and more successful, he sank deeper and deeper into a decadent lifestyle of prostitutes and drugs, including having an affair with a British-born model whom he met at a party named Nadine Caridi. And as would be expected, his antics cost him his first marriage in 1991. But business was booming. And by the end of 91, Belfort was remarried to his model girlfriend, with whom he would have 2 children during their 14-year marriage, Chandler and Carter. Now, just because he got remarried and had kids did not mean he was settling down, because he wasn't. Belfort and executives jet-setted around the world, engaging in debauchery that would get most people thrown into prison. He reportedly used his first Wall Street million to buy a white Ferrari because Don Johnson had one. Belfort once woke up his secretary at 4 a.m. because he was in London and ran out of drugs, and his secretary put together an emergency supply that was immediately sent over on a Concorde jet. On another occasion, Belfort woke up from a drug-fueled bender with the police at his door, arresting him for causing 7 different traffic accidents that he had no recollection of whatsoever. Hell, he even crash-landed a helicopter he was piloting in a drugged state and walked away from it. Simply put, it was a life of chaos. At its peak, Stratton Oakmont employed over 1,000 stockbrokers and was involved in stock issues totaling more than $1 billion. This included being behind the initial public offering for footwear company Steve Madden Limited in 1993. So Steve Madden, who had been a childhood friend of Belfort's partner Danny Porish, had started partying with Belfort and Company, and they hatched a scheme together. During the initial public offering of his footwear company, Madden would acquire a large number of shares, which would actually be controlled by Stratton Oakmont. So then once these shares became available to the general public, the pump was on, and Stratton brokers billed Madden's company as the hottest issue ever on Wall Street. The public buying frenzy that followed drove up the price, and then Madden's shares were sold when the hype was at its peak just before the stock began its inevitable decline. And that, of course, was the dump. And while Madden and Belfort still squabble to this day about exactly how that was supposed to play out, regardless, Jordan Belfort made approximately $23 million in just 2 hours as part of his deal with Steve Madden. And of course, this was dirty money, illegally gained, so it needed to be hidden. So Jordan opens a Swiss bank account at a bank in Geneva that had a reputation for helping United States clients launder money and avoid taxes. What the bank did was allow clients to buy untraceable gold bars worth millions, effectively camouflaging the asset. And Belfort did so in the name of his wife's aunt, who was a British subject and thus further removed from Belfort or any of his American associates. Then he had to figure out how to get the money from the United States to Switzerland undetected. The scheme that they came up with was to become cash mules and have several friends smuggle the cash into Switzerland by carrying it on their bodies or in their luggage. And while it took several trips, ultimately the money was placed, it wasn't in Belfort's name, and all was well. The plan was to gradually launder it and then bring it back to the States, which might have worked, except that the auntie from Britain died suddenly in 1996. And remember, everything was in the auntie's name. Belfort's name is nowhere on this account. So the banker calls Jordan and says, "You need to get here immediately and forge some documents or you're going to lose this money to her estate." Now, at that exact moment, Belfort was on his 167-foot yacht in the middle of the ocean. The vessel, Nadine, renamed after his model wife, was originally built for Coco Chanel in 1961, but it was Belfort's now, and he needed it to get him to his money. So Belfort decides to make a mad dash by yacht to Monaco, where they would dock Nadine and then fly to Switzerland. So Belfort tells his caption, "Full steam ahead." The problem was there was a massive storm between them and their destination, and the captain advised Belfort it was not advisable to attempt to sail through those high winds. And Belfort's like, "It's $23 million. We're going." And they did. And it did not go so well. The high winds and ocean tossed the boat about until the waves smashed through the foredeck hatch and filled the boat with water, resulting in the sinking of the Nadine off the coast of Sardinia, Italy. Frogmen from the Italian Navy Special Forces unit had to rescue everyone on board. Rescued, safe, and dry. That night, Belfort and company stayed in Italy and generated a $700,000 hotel bill in one night. Although in his defense, Belfort later stated it wasn't as bad as it seemed because the bill included a $300,000 piece of jewelry. So it was only a $400,000 bar tab. Not too bad. So it's June 1996, and as you might imagine, you can't have 1,000 cocaine-fueled stockbrokers engaging in questionable tactics and not draw the attention of federal law enforcement officials. In addition, there was constant scrutiny from the securities regulatory authorities, and FBI agent Gregory Coleman had made tracking Belfort a top priority. As Coleman and the feds were closing in, Jordan would learn things from his private investigator, like the FBI was wiretapping his phones. But instead of laying low, Jordan thought he could smooth the federal investigators, and going against all legal advice, he actually arranged to speak with them himself. And while the contents of that conversation is disputed, Belfort ultimately learned that some people cannot be motivated by bribes or money. So at this point, everyone in his life, outside of Stratton, was advising him to get out of the business and for his lawyer to negotiate a deal to keep him out of prison. But Jordan could not help himself and just kept at it. And what finally did him in, the straw that broke the camel's back, was when his banker in Switzerland got arrested and decided to rat out Jordan Belfort. The feds had a lot of evidence against him already, but this was the icing on the cake. And for those keeping score at home, that crooked bank would ultimately wind up paying a penalty of $188 million to avoid prosecution for laundering and hiding money for Jordan Belfort and others. So in 1998, the FBI finally arrests Jordan Belfort, and facing up to 3 decades in prison for securities fraud, he becomes a snitch, agreeing to cooperate with authorities and provide evidence of criminal activity of his colleagues in exchange for leniency. Belfort is allowed to live at home as he is working with the feds, but his world was crashing down around him. Wife Nadine tells Jordan she is divorcing him, and in a fit of cocaine-fueled rage, he kicks her down a flight of stairs, loads up his daughter in his Mercedes, crashes through his garage door, and wrecks the car in his own driveway. Pretty much rock bottom. Shortly thereafter, Jordan was taken into custody. Stratton Oakmont raided. They were expelled from stock market world, and the whole thing was over. Belfort was formally indicted for securities fraud and money laundering in 1999 for running pump and dump and other investment scams that led to investor losses of approximately $200 million. From there, Belfort's lawyers negotiated a plea agreement. Ultimately, Belfort was rewarded for all of his cooperation and received a sentence of 48 months in a minimum security federal prison. He was also ordered to pay back over $110 million that he swindled from stock buyers. Belfort was sent to the Taft Correctional Institution in Taft, California, where he shared a cell with none other than Tommy Chong of Cheech and Chong. No shit. Chong was doing 9 months for selling narcotics paraphernalia, mostly bongs, over the internet through his company, Nice Dreams. And both have reported that they immediately hit it off, each telling stories of their wild adventures. And it was Chong who encouraged Belfort to write about his life experiences. His 2007 memoirs, The Wolf of Wall Street, was first released as a book and then adapted into a movie in 2013 starring Leonardo DiCaprio. The pair would remain friends after their release from prison, with Belfort crediting Chong for his new career direction as a motivational speaker and a writer. But that would all come later. For now, it's year 2000 and Belfort is being released from prison after serving only 22 months. And then the attention would immediately turn to that $110 million that he was ordered to pay back. At the time of his sentence, Belfort had forfeited about $10 million in assets that were used to repay a portion of the restitution owed. Once released, Belfort's restitution agreement required him to pay 50% of his income back to the over 1,500 clients that he defrauded. And that continued for the 3 years while he was on parole, and the amount that he repaid during that time was approximately $700,000. From there, it was agreed that Belfort would pay restitution of $10,000 a month for life. And to Belfort's credit, he has done so. And as mentioned, after his release from prison, in addition to writing those two books, The Wolf of Wall Street and Catching the Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort has worked as a motivational speaker and a corporate consultant. His speaking engagements are run through his business Global Motivation Incorporated, and his per engagement fees and sales seminars have reportedly reached as high as $60,000 per event. Belfort has been particularly popular in Australia, but not without scandal, as he was associated with a face-to-face training company that reportedly received millions of dollars from the government for training it did not provide. Of significance was in one motivational speech delivered in Dubai, where Belfort said, "I got greedy. Greed is not good. Ambition is good. Passion is good. Passion prospers, but not greed. My goal now is to give more than I get, and that's a sustainable form of success." From Jordan Belfort. Belfort has also said that 95% of his stock market business was legitimate. And in a 60 Minutes interview regarding his new career, Belfort stated of his previous life that, quote, his greatest regret was losing people's money. Now, federal prosecutors and SEC officials involved in the case, however, have said that his remorse is not genuine. The lead prosecutor said of his book that he invented much, aggrandized his importance, and that the real Belfort story still includes thousands of victims who lost hundreds of millions of dollars that they will never be repaid. To that end, Belfort has claimed that in addition to the $10,000 a month, he is also putting all of the profits from his U.S. public speaking engagements and all of the media royalties from his books and the movie towards restitution. The government also disputes that claim, saying that he never paid over his $2.2 million in advances he received for his books and the film. During this time, Belfort would marry Ann Kopp in 2008. She is probably best known for coming to Jordan's defense on social media as people criticized his criminal past. The two would ultimately divorce in 2020. So that brings us to the final question. Where are these people today? Well, let's start with Danny Porish, Belfort's business partner. He would serve 39 months in prison for his part in the corrupt dealings of Stratton Oakmont. And as an interesting side note, there was a point of comedic relief in the movie where Jonah Hill, his character, talks about marrying his first cousin. Well, that turns out to be true. Porish did, and they had 3 kids. However, it wouldn't last as the couple divorced in 1998 after 12 years of marriage. Porish would go on to get arrested again in 2001 in connection with a fraud scheme surrounding a collectibles company that sold commemorative coins over the phone. Victims allegedly saw their credit cards charged repeatedly, at times for thousands of dollars, while never receiving any merchandise for those purchases. Today, Porish runs a medical supply business in Florida where he lives with his second wife, Lisa, in a $4 million mansion. but not without controversy, as a Forbes article was published detailing a number of complaints that surfaced accusing Portia's company of unscrupulous Medicaid practices. Now let's turn to Steve Madden. For his part in the pump and dump scheme with his company, Steve Madden was sentenced to 41 months in prison and was forced to resign as CEO of Steve Madden Limited. He was also forced to resign from the company's board of directors. However, he did not leave the company entirely, and he kept his foot or shoe in the door by giving himself the title of creative consultant, for which he was well compensated even while he was in prison. Today, Madden currently serves as the company's founder and design chief, with it reportedly making almost $2 billion last year. Quite a company. How about Nadine Caridi? Belfort and Caridi divorced in 2005, but the two continue to have 2 adult children together. Nadine Macaluso, as she is now called after remarrying, currently practices as a licensed marriage and family therapist in New York. She is affectionately referred to as Dr. Nay by her patients. And P.S. for those who are interested, wife number 1, Denise Lombardo, presently lives in Naples, Florida, and is involved in the fashion industry. And last, but definitely not least, Jordan Belfort. Although banned from stocks and any type of security, he has begun endorsing and peddling crypto, which is not currently regulated as a security by the United States. Interestingly, in 2001, a hacker stole $300,000 in digital tokens from Belfort's cryptocurrency wallet. Belfort is currently married to his 4th wife, Christina Invernizzi, whom he wed in 2021. And he is reportedly an avid tennis player. So that's the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to know more about Jordan Belfort, I would encourage you to read either of his 2 books, watch the biopic The Wolf of Wall Street, or if you want to keep up with him real time these days, he's on Twitter. And yes, his handle is @WolfOfWallStreet. If you enjoyed the episode, hit that like button for me. If you got something to say, put it in the comment sections below. If you haven't subscribed, do so now, please. I would appreciate it. That's all for today. I'm Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you've been watching Lawyer Up.